Hey guys! Look, Belle's really joined us for this book. I might have gotten some treats to bribe her. You say hi? Say hi? Good girl. Okay, so today we are going to read a book called Grace for President. The author is Kelly DiPuccio and the illustrator is Nguyen Pham. Alright, so this is our last March Madness book that we have. So after this, we'll be reading Miss Epley's choice of books. Girl. Okay, Grace for President. And so you can see this is like the inside art is all the presidents and then Grace's picture in a frame. And the title page. One Monday morning in September, Mrs. Barrington rolled out a big poster with all of the president's pictures on it. Grace Campbell could not believe her eyes. Where are the girls? Look, there are no girls on here. Grace is so surprised. That is a very good question, said Mrs. Barrington. The truth is, our country has never had a woman president. No girl president ever? Grace asked. I'm afraid not, said Mrs. Barrington. Grace sat at her desk and stewed. That means that she was just so mad inside of herself. No girls? Who'd ever heard of such a crazy thing? Finally, she raised her hand. Yes, Grace. I've been thinking it over, and I would like to be president. Several students in the class laughed. Well, I think that's a star-spangled idea, Grace, said Mrs. Barrington. In fact, we can have our own election right here at Woodrow Wilson Elementary. The snickering in the room stopped, and Grace smiled. Would anyone else like to run for president? Mrs. Barrington asked the class. No one raised their hands. Becoming president was going to be easy, Grace thought. Won't you sit in Mommy lap? Okay. Did you read the book? The next day, Mrs. Barrington made an announcement. In the name of democracy, I have invited Mr. Waller's class to join our election. Their class has nominated Thomas Cobb to be their presidential candidate. Grace's heart sank. Thomas was the school spelling bee champion. His experiments always took a blue ribbon at the science fair, and he was captain of the soccer team. Becoming president wasn't going to be so easy after all, Grace thought. The teachers put the names of all 50 states and the District of Columbia into a hat. Everyone except for Grace and Thomas got to choose a state. I'm Texas, said Anthony. I'm New Hampshire, said Rose. I'm Michigan, said Robbie. What does the number 17 mean? Each state is assigned a number of electoral votes. That number is determined by how many people live in that state, said Mrs. Barrington. Each of you will be a representative for your state. So every state has a number of people that live in it, and then how many people are there, bye Belle, determine how many number of electoral votes that you get. Altogether, our country has 538 electoral votes. It just makes it easier, apparently, to make the number smaller when you're picking a president for voting. On election day, the candidate who receives 270 electoral votes or more wins the election. So basically, all the people vote for who they want, and then the people that are in your electoral, they look at who the people in the state voted for, and they vote for someone. And so if 270 or more of the electoral people voted for someone, that is who wins the election. Why 270? Asked Rose. That's more than half of all the electoral votes, Mr. Waller said. Becoming president really wasn't going to be so easy, Grace thought. A lot of math to do, too. Grace came up with the campaign slogan, "Make history, vote Grace Campbell for president." And Thomas came up with his own campaign slogan, "Vote Thomas Cobb, the best man for the job." Grace listened to what issues were important to the students, and she made a list of campaign promises. A peaceful school and no bullies. A cleaner school, no littering. Better hot lunches, and no more fish stick tacos for lunch. Thomas made up his own list of promises. Free tutoring, free soccer lessons, fish stick tacos every week. Grace made campaign posters and buttons, and Thomas made posters and buttons too. This is how you try to get people's votes. So you have a slogan, and you tell them you're going to get them what they want, and that makes them like you to want to vote for you. Each week, the teacher set aside time for the candidates to meet with their constituents. Polls were taken, and the voters were making their choices. So the candidate is the person that's running for president, and all these people here who follow them and want to vote for them, they're their constituents. And when they take a poll, it's kind of like a small vote to see who people are just thinking about electing. Grace continued to campaign. At recess, she gave speeches. During lunch, she handed out free cupcakes. And after school, she held rallies. She's doing all these things to try to make people think that she'll be a good president and gain popularity. Meanwhile, Thomas was not worried. He had cleverly calculated that the boys held slightly more electoral votes than the girls. At recess, Thomas studied his spelling words. During lunch, he worked on his latest science experiment, and after school, he played soccer. Was Thomas working very hard to become president? No. He was just thinking that since the boys had more votes in the electoral than the girls, the boys would just vote for him. Even before the election, Grace made good on her promises. She joined the safety squad, she organized a school beautification committee, and she volunteered her time in the school cafeteria. So here's her doing all the things, and then she gets home. She's exhausted, probably, from all that hard work. Do you think that Grace is going to become president after all her hard work? In early November, Woodrow Wilson Elementary hosted a special Election Day assembly. Grace and Thomas took their places on stage as the school band began to play. Henry was the first representative to approach the microphone. The Yellowhammer State of Alabama cast its 9 electoral votes for Thomas Cobb. So that's 9 for Thomas. The Last Frontier State of Alaska cast its 3 electoral votes for the best man for the job, Thomas Cobb. So now Thomas has 9, 10, 11, 12 votes. Hannah called out, "The Grand Canyon State of Arizona cast its 10 electoral votes for Grace Campbell." And so it went. State after state after state cast their electoral votes. The scoreboard at the gymnasium kept track of the totals. So here's the scoreboard. It's going to show Thomas and Grace's totals. And whoever gets to 270 is going to win. The voting demonstration was quickly coming to an end. Clara approached the podium. The Badger State of Wisconsin cast its 10 votes for my best friend, Grace Campbell. Grace looked at the scoreboard. Thomas had 268 electoral votes, and she had 267. There was only one state still unaccounted for: Wyoming. So They're so close. Thomas has one more than her, so it depends all on who Wyoming votes for as who's going to win. Thomas grinned. Why is he grinning? He thinks that since Wyoming's a boy, Wyoming will vote for him. Grace felt sick. Sam walked up to the microphone. He looked at Thomas. He looked at Grace. He looked down at Grace's handmade flag. Sam didn't say a word. "What are you waiting for?" Thomas whispered. The band stopped playing. All eyes were on Wyoming. Finally, Sam cleared his throat. The equality state of Wyoming cast its 3 electoral votes for Grace Campbell! The gymnasium erupted in loud cheers and a few boos. Mrs. Barrington approached the podium. With 270 electoral votes, the winner is Grace Campbell. Thomas looked stunned. Grace hugged Sam. "Why did you do it?" she asked. Sam handed Grace his flag. "Because," he said, "I thought you were the best person for the job." The following week, the students in Mrs. Barrington's class were preparing for their career day presentations. Grace volunteered to go first. She stood at the front of the room and glanced at the poster still hanging on the wall. "My name is Grace Campbell, and when I grow up, I'm going to be the President of the United States." This time, everyone believed that she would. They believed she would because she had become president of the school. And look, there she is, becoming the president when she's grown up. The end. So, wonderful story about Grace President and how voting all works. So this is something that all the grown-ups are going to be doing come November when we pick our next president. Bye!